DeRosa gives us a thumbs up that we're actually
sorry.
live. Okay, we're good.
Good. Should I start again?
So no, I think we're okay.
Okay. So we're calling the meeting to order at 6:45. The first order of business is actually Pledge of Allegiance, but that's left over from way back in the day when we used to have in-person meetings, which we're not having right now. So we will go past that one. Next item is the approval of minutes. That is from the May 11th, 2020 meeting, the regular Board of Education meeting. Would someone like to make a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Mr. Brown, any comments regarding the minutes? I think we have 9 pages of them, so there's a lot. Okay. Seeing none, I will call that. All those in favor of acceptance of the minutes?
Aye.
Are we doing a roll call?
Yes, we are. So hang on. Oh, I just moved my sheet of paper. All right. So Mr. Belmonte.
Yes.
Ms. Burke.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. Okay. Let's see. Ms. Eichler.
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard.
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin. I
Yes.
see a finger up. There we go. Mr. Reed
Yes.
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Excellent.
Very good. Okay. Now we'll move on to the next item, and that is the student report, the last student report for our students.
Hi, so we just want to quickly start off our student report by introducing our new junior Board of Ed rep, Allie. She's on this call.
Hi.
Hi, Allie. Welcome.
Thank you. It's very good to be here.
Great.
Okay, perfect. So then we will move on. So the seniors finished their last day of high school a couple weeks ago, and underclassmen are wrapping up their final week of school before summer vacation begins this Friday. Seniors virtually attended senior award nights where they receive recognition for their work in individual classes and receive scholarships. Administration also visited seniors through their bus tours to hand deliver senior gifts and personally connect with seniors before their graduation. The majority of seniors will be graduating this Wednesday via a drive-by graduation, and the remaining are graduating in July on the field. Moving on to underclassmen, the underclassmen award ceremony has been postponed to the fall, and currently underclassmen are making sure they have all of their assignments in before the quarter ends this Thursday. Then for the middle schools, AMSO and AMSB are getting ready for their drive-through moving up ceremonies this Friday, June 12th. The program is a hybrid with radio messages from town officials and administration, followed by the distribution of certificates. AMSO staff enjoyed sharing their musical talents in a mass singer competition as part of the off-site learning for general music. Students enjoyed unmasking 8 staff members. And then AMSO students were able to get their personal items back last week. AMSO staff members cleaned out all 389 lockers, and device return will be June 15th. And then we also wanted to address what has been going on in light of current events and how it has impacted the students. So since we're not in school, there has been a large amount of activism from the student body through both social media and real life. Many students have been participating in protests and expressing their views through these protests and also social media posts and such. Student organizations such as Student Government have tried their best to get involved by donating to organizations such as Campaign Zero, which advocates for policy solutions to prevent police brutality. So that sums up our student report, and I think Ella and Olivia wanted to say something really quickly to wrap up.
Yeah, so we just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to work with you all for the past two years and creating this position, which is definitely one of our proudest accomplishments of our time at Amity. We really learned a lot about leadership, becoming comfortable speaking in front of an intimidating group of people. And and standing up for our thoughts and ideas. And we really look up to all of you so much. In the fall, I'm going to be going off to Vassar to study English. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you.
I want to echo everything Olivia said. It's been such an honor and such a great experience to be here with you guys every Monday night, and then the committee meetings as well was such a fun addition in our senior year, and we really got to be a part of that process, which was really cool for us. We plan on coming hopefully to one of the next meetings in person to probably say goodbye. And then in the fall, I will be going to Dartmouth to likely study environmental science. So yes, we will definitely miss you, but it's been such a great time.
Well, we really enjoyed having both of you. You guys did such a great job. You represented the student body really well. And, you know, it was really nice to have a beat on what was going on in the 3 schools every month. And you guys really made the job your own. You were really kind of trailblazers in it, and, you know, did such a nice job of communicating with us. So we really appreciate all you did. Good luck in Vassar, good luck in Dartmouth, and I'm sure you guys will do awesome. So thanks again.
Cheers. Way to go, folks. Way. Woo!
Awesome. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you so much, you two. And your falls might be messy, but I hope the rest of your lives are terrific. Thank you so much for your service.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Okay, moving on. The next item on the agenda is the recognition of students. Dr. Byers, would you like to take this?
Sure, absolutely. So typically we would be able to invite the students and their families to a board meeting. We'd be in the cafeteria because we would have such a huge audience. But instead, we've done it virtually. And so I do hope these students and families are tuned into YouTube and are able to hear the announcements. But we are actually recognizing 3 different groups of students this evening. The first are going to be our CABE Student Leadership Award recipients, CABE being the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. And we select 2 students from each of our schools based on the students' willingness to take on challenges, their capability to make difficult decisions, their concern for others, their ability to work with others, their willingness to commit to a project, their diplomacy, ability to understand issues clearly, and their ability to honor a commitment. So this evening, the students from Amity Regional Middle School Orange, who are receiving the CABE Student Leadership Award, are Reagan French and Thomas Denton. So yay for Reagan and Thomas. From Amity Middle School Bethany, we have Alessandro Gopal and Arushi Trivedi. And they are both receiving the CABE recognition. And then from Amity Regional High School, we have Alexandra Marinescu and Jack Renani. So congratulations to those 6 students on their receipt of the CABE Student Leadership Awards. The second set of awards that we have this evening are the SCASA Superintendent's Student Recognition Awards. And typically these would have been awarded in April, and we would have had a lovely luncheon together with the students and their parents and our administrators. Of course, that didn't happen. We are also still waiting for the certificates for these students. And in this case, we have 4 students who are recognized, 1 from each middle school and 2 from the high school. So representing Amity Middle School Bethany, we are pleased that the SCASA award goes to Liliana Fleming. From the Amity Middle School in Orange, we award the SCASA to Sophia Silva Rodriguez. And representing Amity Regional High School, we will award the SCASA award to Alexandra Marinescu and Will Gambardella, sorry. So congratulations to those 4 students. And in both cases, for the CABE and the SCASA, we will be mailing those certificates home to the students. And then finally, our last award is the Jack B. Levine Efficiency Award of Excellence. In this case, one of our district's goals has always been to provide our educational programming, but being mindful of the fiscal impact on taxpayers. And so we look for cost savings and efficiencies every year. And we also have developed a process so that our students are able to provide suggestions and recommendations to the district for improvements in those areas. This is the 5th year of the award, and we selected 3 students, 1 from each of our schools. They were chosen from 17 applications, and so we would like to congratulate all the students who submitted some ideas. And our 2020 Jack B. Levine Efficiency Award winners are Hannah Glau from Amity Middle School, Bethany, James Liu from Amity Middle School, Orange, and Allison Sue from Amity Regional High School. So congratulations to those students. In addition to getting a certificate, they also receive a financial award, a financial gift for their ideas. So they will be receiving those in the mail as well.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you, Dr. Byers. Okay, moving on. We have the superintendent's report. It's back to you, Dr. Byers.
Absolutely. So just a couple updates. First of all, we put out a survey about our offsite learning program. It was a combination to sort of evaluate how the processes we did this past spring were working for our students and parents and staff, and then to use that information to help us plan in the event that we are offsite again at some point in the future. For anybody who's ever distributed a survey, response rates tend not to be great. But in this case, we have over 1,000 student responses, almost 700 responses from parents, and about 185 teacher responses. So actually the feedback we've received has been tremendous, and it's given us a lot of information to help us figure out what we did really well that we can keep on doing, and then also some areas where we can look for improvements. I would like to commend the high school building leadership team for collaborating to create a virtual presentation for our senior awards night. You heard that the underclassmen awards are postponed until the fall, but we still had scholarships to give out to our seniors in recognition there. And they put together a great program that is available on our YouTube channel if you did not have a chance to watch that. And again, it's all part of our theme of trying to make this moment as special as we can for the class of 2020. Along with that, I would like to recognize the high school staff for their senior bus tour. They visited 371 houses of our seniors over a 3-day period, driving about 310 miles over the Bethany, Orange, and Woodbridge area. If you had a chance to follow them on Twitter or Instagram, it was pretty amazing watching them go up and down some of those driveways and deliver the senior gifts and say hi to their seniors for one last time. And then lastly, I just want to make the board aware that the federal government awarded states, which then trickles down to school districts with the CARES grant. It's essentially based off of the Title I funding, but it really was intended to make up for some of the costs that we have related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We received about $55,000 in aid. And so we will be looking this summer the best way that we would look to spend some of that money. It is not intended to supplant anything. It's really entirely to help support something that's related to the pandemic itself. And so we do have a few ideas of things that we think we can do that will really have the most benefit for all of the students in the district. And we will be working on that application as well. So that's a quick summary of the superintendent's report. And yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Byers. Moving on to item 7, correspondence. Did we have any correspondence this month, Ms. Eichler?
No correspondence this month.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 8, the chairman's report, and then followed by the committee report. So just a couple of things I wanted to mention. One is I spoke with Dr. Byers, and we spoke about the review that is always done in June. We do one in the winter and one in the spring. And this is her review. And Dr. Byers graciously volunteered to hold off on the review at this point in light of all that's going on with preparations for graduation, with preparations for next year, and navigating our way through the end of this year. So I just wanted to thank her for that. She and I spoke about it. We were going to look at this point at doing something in August. So you guys will all be hearing about that. So thank you, Dr. Byers, for that consideration. The second item I just wanted to mention is we are still in the current regulations of indoor assembly amounts of 10 people. It used to be 5. A couple weeks ago, the governor bumped it up to 10. We were talking today about when it would be appropriate to think about having a meeting in person, and really we would need that number inside to be 20 because there's 13 of us. We have the normal staff that joins us and the IT department and Sean. And so, really until it's 20, we can't do that. We don't have a July meeting. Hopefully by August, maybe we'll be there. So we'll see. And then also there is no change currently in hosting subcommittees. We only have subcommittee meetings if there's actionable items that the board needs to vote on. I know personnel, I believe, was assembled, and policy will be coming up on something. So, until we get advice from the state, that's still going to be in effect. Okay, we can move on to district technology. Mr. DeMeo, did you have anything for that you wanted to discuss?
I wasn't at the meeting. I didn't even know that there was one. I don't know.
I think you're breaking up on us a little bit. I know we do have a monthly report on page 27, which everyone has in their packet.
So I think I can summarize the meeting fairly quickly. We got a few updates on the one-to-one devices, which the board will hear later, but we are looking for every possible way that we can do one-to-one for grades 7 through 11. So originally it was going to be 7 to 10 this year, but anticipating that there is going to be a continuation of some format of distance learning. And knowing that we really did experience differences between the middle schools, which had their one-to-ones, versus the high school, which was all still kind of BYOD. We're making that recommendation to look at getting those one-to-ones, and we had some discussion on that. The other big thing that we had discussion with at that meeting was identifying a common learning platform. So that the students and parents in a distance learning site wouldn't have to sort of juggle between a couple different platforms depending on teachers. And so as we explore our reopening schools committee, we'll make some decisions around that as well in the next couple of weeks. So that kind of summarizes that district technology meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Byers. Okay, moving on to facilities. I know there's a monthly report on page 28.
There's a monthly report, and we haven't had a meeting based on items. I think most of our issues would be relating to the field right now, which I think we'll hear some of that. But in general, we haven't pulled a regular facilities meeting. Also, the schools are closed in most respects, so there's not a lot of facility issues right now to address.
Okay. Jim, would you like to add anything to that with your report or any other things going on?
So I'm actually going to ask if we can slide down a little bit to item B before we talk to Jim and talk about the athletic facilities donations. We have Mr. Goodwin here for informing us on that. And then when we get to the project updates, we'll have Jim come on board and he can give us kind of a general update and then talk about the projects as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. The Booster Club, the Amity Athletics Booster Club has been operating for a lot of years, and they have a pretty good amount of money in the till, and they wanted to make some donations to our school and athletics. The first one are Boulevard banners. So you'll see them at a lot of colleges and some high schools around. They're 2-foot by 6-foot banners that go up on the telephone poles. They'll say Amity on them, home of the Spartans. They'll have our logos on them. Very, very nice. We already got the price out on those, and they would like to donate those. And then also on our field number 3, which is our soccer lacrosse field, that's also getting some updates with some bleachers in the hill and a scoreboard. They want to donate a scorer's hut, I guess you would call it. Not really a press box. We really won't have room for press box, but it's a place that we can store game things like corner flags and other miscellaneous items. Also, the person running the scoreboard and the scorekeepers. Right now, we just use this concrete picnic table that we bring out, but this would be an 8-foot by 10-foot salt box, a little shed that'll have a nice window in it, so that the scorekeepers can stay out of the elements and that kind of stuff when we have games there. Those are the 2 items that they would like to donate.
Neat. That's great. Yeah, that's great. Ernie, just while you're here and while you're on, I just wanted to say thank you to you for the blockade dinner. I watched the rerun of that today. You did a very nice job producing it and hosting it, and it was great to see all the coaches again and see all of the athletes at the end with the live picture, or the still picture of them in their uniforms and stuff. So that was really nice. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. It's tough not to have it in person.
I'm sure it was. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Byers, what are we moving on to next? Or the monthly
So again, just the donations from the boosters is informational for the board, but I am going to just ask Jim to chime in. He can give a quick rundown on the monthly report, but then more importantly, give us an update on where our projects that we approved in December are currently sort of at.
Great.
Good evening. Good to see everybody again. Unless there's questions on the facilities report, I mean, the line items that we've been accomplishing, our team has really been busy in all of the buildings. We're getting caught up on lots of projects that normally could have even hit the 5-year capital plan, such as repainting a lot of the metal works and the railings and those types of things in the schools. We're probably about 65 to 70% done with the normal summer cleaning at this point in time. And we, like I said, we branched out to other projects such as painting. When people are able to come back into the buildings, it'd be nice to do a walkthrough, because the buildings are really coming together nicely in different areas there. As far as our big projects, the paving project, you awarded the contract last month, and so I've got the initial kickoff meeting for the asphalt project scheduled. And as soon as we get done with the drive-by graduations and such, we'll be able to hopefully get on the contractor schedule and get the majority of that done. Again, just a reminder, this will be a 2-phase one. There will be paving next summer. It doesn't do us any good to pave the areas from the tennis courts all the way up to the back gate with all of the construction that'll be taking place with heavy equipment and stuff on the field. And so we'll do the rear parking lot that is senior parking and staff parking, the fire road, and the area from the transition corner for the fields on up to the edge of the tennis courts. And then next summer will be it'll be bid again, and contractors won't hold, because it's oil-based pricing. They won't hold the pricing very long. HVAC is coming along nicely. I think last time I reported, the train was planning to ship the units on June 30th, which would have been a little tight, because once they ship, it's about a 5-week project to do the demo and do the install of the new. The good news is now they're supposed to ship right around June 14th. So our contractor has gotten all of the submittals done and approved by our engineers. We have all the building permits in hand, so we're ready to go. They're not going to start dismantling any of the old units just in case something happens with train with all this pandemic stuff. And then we've got 5 units that are out and no new units to put in. So the minute they get the bill of lading of shipping the new units, then they'll start doing the demo up there. We got the door during the April break. We got the there's a single door that goes up into that equipment mezzanine from the outside roof, and we expanded that and had a double door put in, so it's easier to crane items in and out. And rather than having to dismantle our new units and reassemble them inside, we won't have to do that. I think most of you saw the memo from Dr. Byers on the stadium project. The wetlands meeting went very well last week. And so that portion of it's done, but the planning and zoning portion of it will be on July 6th. And at this point, we don't see any issues with getting the permits there. Being that there will be there will be some graduations up there, the 6th and possibly the 7th. We've told them that they could start doing construction on the field portion of it on July 8th, provided everything, which, you know, we're confident that'll go well in planning and zoning. What they can start working on, though, is the additional bleachers on the soccer field that Ernie alluded to earlier, and the handicap accessible walkway out to there. So we'll be, you know, so we will have some construction work starting in June as part of that big project. The sound panel portion of it is going to take place at the middle schools is delayed a little bit. The contractor that we've been working with, obviously they were affected by things. They had personnel actually leave their company. And so I've actually got their engineer coming down on Wednesday to do another walkthrough because it's a brand new person. So, when I had a conversation with them this afternoon, anything that is purchased through them from Wenger is for sound acoustical stuff is about a 12-week lead time at this point. But the good thing about that is it's not a tricky install in the cafeterias and music rooms. You know, those are things that can be done even after school if we're in any kind of semblance of normalcy for the school year. So those projects will keep pushing forward at this point.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Jim? Guess you covered it.
Good.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to finance. Ms. Cardozo, Ms. Loomis, you guys want to take this, please?
Sure. I'll have Terry start with there's so many, but let's go one at a time and I'll comment on how the board, the finance committee reacted.
Thank you.
So the first resolution we asked the board to approve is to possibly refund some of our existing debt while we're issuing the new debt. This is a small issue back from 2012. It was originally $4 million. There's about 1.4 that at one point a few weeks ago looked very favorable to refinance. However, as the market improved, this opportunity is eluding us. However, if the board does approve, the approval is good for a year, and should we have any other refinancing opportunity, this can be lumped in with that. And we will watch the market right up until we, issue our official statement and see if this does turn back to a more favorable opportunity for us to save some funds. But the resolution is listed there. There's a small motion to read and then about 2 pages of resolution, minus the first paragraph dated February 12th of 2018. We're starting with the bold print of June 8th, 2020. I know Ms. Cardozo wants to talk about the finance committees. They did approve.
Yep. Thank you, Terry. I just wanted to let you know that we did discuss it. We love the difference between refunding and refinancing, but for our purposes, we may just consider it a great thing to have this passed, and that is what the AFC voted. So the AFC did agree to recommend that the Amity Board of Ed act upon the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to accept this? And then we could have discussion if need be.
So moved.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Brown. And we will have discussion if anyone has any questions regarding this.
Just so everybody knows, it's about $20,000 to do the refinancing. So it wouldn't make sense to do it unless there was about a $50,000 savings, about 2.5 times that. And that's what the threshold is. That's what they're monitoring.
Okay. And do I understand it correctly that maybe 3 months ago, this was a better idea at that point, and then things kind of changed?
Yeah.
I think it's close. Yeah, I think it's changing day by day. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any comments, questions? Okay. Can we do a roll call?
We absolutely can. Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo, I see a thumbs up from Mr. DeMayo. Thank you. Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
and Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to the tuition rate for 2020, 2021.
So we set this annually. We bring it before the board. It's based on a formula of net current student expenditures indexed for our budget increases. There are certain expenses that are allowed and certain ones that are excluded. For instance, we add in all grant funds and we exclude debt service and tuition. There's a modest increase for regular education of $71, bringing the tuition recommended at $18,596. We also calculate a special ed base tuition rate using a very similar formula for special ed costs. That is $19,258. That is the base rate. And then based on a student's specific IEP and what services they may need, the pricing below is the rates that we have in place for those services, and they would be added on to the base rate if applicable and as needed to develop a specific special ed tuition rate by student.
Okay, thank you. And the Amity Finance Committee voted for this, Ms. Cardozo?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the non-residential tuition rate for 2020-2021 school year at $18,596 and the non-residential special education based tuition rate at 2020-2021 school year at $19,258 plus any additional services.
Thank you, Mr. Brow. Would someone second that, please?
I'll second that.
Mr. Howard, thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
thank you. Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo, Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item C, the discussion of monthly financial statements on page 35.
So I'm going to preface this. I asked Ms. Loomis to move this up earlier in the agenda from where we would normally have it, because I think some decisions that happen later on around contracts and some bids actually are predicated on you kind of knowing where our current status is. The other thing is because it's a lot to absorb everything that changed in our finances from February until June. She's put together a very brief PowerPoint that she will walk the group through. And so I'm going to ask her to share her screen and take us through the sort of visuals so you can have an understanding of kind of how we ended up where we currently are.
Great.
Go back to the beginning, sorry. So because as Dr. Beyer said, a lot did change from February to the end of this year as we're approaching it. With not having in-person learning, we thought we'd highlight some of those specific line items that really had a major impact on how we're ending the year. So these are some of the services and operations, very abruptly interrupted. School transportation. You're very much aware that the buses have not been transporting students to school as they are having learning from home. So that affected not only that, but then our winter and spring sports. Winter sports was truncated and did not have a tournament portion to their season. So that affected transportation, perhaps awards, officials, things to that matter. Spring sports had a very soft opening of remote conditioning from some of the coaches with their student athletes, but there was no transportation for that. There was no field trips in the spring, which is really the heaviest season for field trips. And then our regular contract, we developed an MOU with the owner operators to save some funds on the base contract. Winter and spring sports, as I mentioned, as far as transportation, also officials, equipment, as far as reconditioning, entry fees into contests, and the coaches. So there were significant savings there. Police coverage, the Woodbridge is crediting us for the SRO services that were not needed from March through the end of the year. And that also being the heavy time of activities where we would have graduation, we would have the play, we would have many evening events that would require the hiring of police officers to cover the events. Obviously, with our buildings closed, those events did not happen and those coverages were avoided. Fuel, since the buses weren't running, we did not have to purchase the fuel to the full extent. We had a contract, we're in a consortium bid with the town of Woodbridge. There was not an option to store the fuel. We did explore that, but there was quite a glut in the market at that point as school districts across the state all shut down and no one was using their fuel. So there was no place to store the fuel. We did have to pay a reduced rate, but we did save about $43,000 on the fuel cost. Utilities, between having a mild winter and having really so far a mild spring, not having a lot of air conditioning or heating costs to an excessive, and the buildings not being occupied with the number of bodies it normally is, and certainly not in the evenings, we are saving on utilities. Medical is probably the largest swing in savings. In February, we were running at 95.7% of our expected claims, pretty much right on budget. And we have now dropped to 84.1%. And I anticipate that that will go down further to approximately 80% when we end the year of claims. That's over an $800,000 savings on that line. And that's really people, hospitals were not open, doctors were not seeing people for routine visits and procedures. Salaries, that is some of the changes that we talked about with officials, coaches. The substitutes were not needed since we were not in the buildings. There was not overtime since we were not having those extracurricular activities and being open to the extent we normally are. Dues and fees, conferences were not held. There were not athletic contests to enter into. So there were savings on the dues and fees line for the spring timeframe. So if we look at the fund balance that was projected in the February report, it was $559,000. Right now, we're looking at an end of year projection of 2.8 million before our ask of 1.7 million in purchases and reserves. Some of these have already come before you in the form of, in efforts to trim the budget for next year. If all of those requests are approved, the fund balance right now is estimated to be about 1.1 million, and that would be unspent and returned to the member towns. The 1.7 does include the 1% to the capital non-reoccurring account. So kind of figures to go with those line items that I told you about in a few slides earlier. And this is really changes from February to June. So there's the salary, accompanying payroll taxes, the transportation and the fuel that goes with that, fewer rentals for facilities, whether that's swimming, whether it's golf tees, just events that did not happen, the dues and fees, technology and going to a quick distance learning environment. We put off buying some of the purchases, and you'll see that we're looking to better use them for distance learning later on in the packet as request. The contract reductions, I talked about the SRO, the officials, the athletic trainer services that were not provided, and either we had full credits or we negotiated credits on those. The utilities I mentioned, about 76,000. That medical line right now projecting to be about 858,000 surplus. Contingency, we really didn't have to go into that other than for the request for engineering and architectural services for our bonded projects. So we were able to have those funds available to us. And we had some increased revenue since February on the special ed CDAC report. So that's roughly about 1.5 million. So if we look at how the fund balance is without end of year purchases, we'd have about 5.79% of our budget unspent, or the 2.8 million. I tried to find out how that, compared us to other districts in the state of Connecticut. I received 13 responses, and the average was about 1.75 after, they had commentary of, well, the board has allowed us to put aside 1%. The board has allowed us to spend X dollars. That number is net of those requests that are going on in other districts around the state. But it was interesting to look specifically the 4 regional school districts, us being one of them. We had one at 2%, and then 2 were over 6%, 6 and 6.6, which I think is more of a truer comparison, looking at us in comparison to a regional school district. The things we operate, the insurance funds, the transportation our own, the fuel, and employee benefits and such. So if our requests are approved, the fund balance would go down to 2.3%, or about 1.1 million. And that is allowing 1.7 in end of year purchases, including items cut from the fiscal year 21 budget and the emerging needs. What would some of those things be spent on? So we already have 257,000 that we cut from the fiscal year 21 budget that were identified over the last few months and approved. The infrastructure, you had approved 300,000, I believe, in April. We're looking to maximize the project that was approved and avoid some financing costs there. Teacher devices, we think that it is better to purchase the teacher devices because they will have a longer lifespan than a 3-year lease. And that would free up money in the 21 budget to lease the 11th grade devices for students. Currently, the budget had only proposed 9th and 10th. And since we are anticipating that there will be some form of distance learning in fiscal year 21, we would like to be more prepared and have teachers have devices in hands and more students have devices, more current devices in their hands. PPE is personal protective equipment. That's a total of 18,000. We had 4,000 or so asked for last month for nurses, and another 14,000. Trying to be conservative here and figure out our best estimate. We have a couple challenges here. The state has not exactly issued definite guidelines. They've outlined some things, but we don't know what that's going to look like in August. As far as how many masks, whether it's masks and gloves to provide. And then we don't have a lot of storage to store these items. They're not easily available. So we're trying to be conservative there and get a better handle on what will be needed. In security, we're looking to purchase 4 thermal cameras, and the benefit of these cameras are that they can take individuals' temperatures as they enter the building and check and see if they are wearing a mask. One of our many discussions was how daunting it would be to have nurses trying to check 1,400 students into a high school in a relatively short period of time by using, infrared or digital thermometers. These cameras can allow 100 individuals to pass through in a minute's time. and flag those not wearing a mask or with a temperature that they can be pulled aside. One of the cameras is proposed to be mobile so that we can take it to events or other things if we need it. So we'd have 2 at the high school, 1 being mobile, 1 in each middle school. The software is a bridge between our current Munis financial program, which is where we run our payroll and our accounting out of, and the program is our Frontline, which is where we manage our substitute coverage and the employees' time off. All of and our onboarding of new hires. All of our work between these programs right now is manual and duplicate entry, and they constantly need to talk to each other. This has been a budget ask for a couple of years and is been put off, but now that we are really trying to make our onboarding process more electronic and avoid that in-person need for the person to be in the building less times, this software would help facilitate that. The medical reserve of that 800,000 that is expected to be left, I am recommending that we increase the reserve from 25 to 30%. That means using of that 800,000, 229,000 to put in the reserve for just a period of 1 year. You know, the medical advice we are reading and our consultants and with my colleagues around the state, there is really an expectation of a surge in medical claims. Right now, we are benefiting from being self-insured, and the fact that individuals have not been able to go to the doctors, that money is staying in the district. If we were a fully paid program, that money would still be going out the door to the insurance company. However, when people feel more comfortable, when hospitals open for routine procedures, doctors start to see people for routine visits, we do expect that those claims will go back up and maybe higher than a normal year. And if there is a second wave of the COVID virus outbreak, that could increase claims. So that is the rationale there. Cafeteria, I've been mentioning for months how it has been running at a deficit. I had projected 125. I think between the way the emergency meal program ran with extra commodities from the government, commodities from the local districts combining with us, use of their staff, the increase in prices that we're lowering that down to $100,000. We also face challenges next year with the cafeterias to how we will serve students and whether individual packaging will be needed, whether additional staff will be needed to serve meals in different locations other than the CAF. So we are concerned there will be increased costs there. Unemployment, really a guess at this point. We know we have processed a number of applications. We pay 100% of the cost of unemployment. We have only seen claims through the last 2 weeks of March, so really not a significant way to judge how many people have gotten into that system. So the state system has always worked. We are billed 2 months in the arrears of actual claims. And then the 1% capital non-reoccurring is the $495,000. And that we would put aside for, more unknowns of what could happen in our opening and reopening school.
And if I can just speak briefly to that 1%, I mean, I don't know if I can impress upon the board enough kind of the uncertainty that we face every single day. So, right before the weekend, we got a message that school districts may now be responsible for providing special education services for students after they've either graduated or after they've aged out from our program for 18 to 21-year-olds. With the understanding that we have not been able to provide the type of services that they would have traditionally received in the spring, and we may now be responsible for that. The PPEs, we talked about it the last time, and the discussion of the numbers that may be required to open schools. It could run our district up to $500,000 just to provide what some of those recommendations are. When we think about transportation, the current recommendations on transportation will make a 78-passenger bus into a 12-passenger bus. So the number of buses that would be needed for transportation or the number of runs may be significant. And we're just hitting a huge number of unknowns. And I think the real key difference, and I think you see this reflected in those different amounts that districts are carrying forward that they didn't spend, is that we as a regional school district will never have a fund balance to go back to. So unlike a town school district that could ask the town for additional appropriations through a town's fund balance, we just don't have that. Carrying only 1% is actually a really small margin for us to operate in a place with such a huge unknown. But I will advocate strongly that the complete lack of certainty over what next year is going to bring, that 1% is going to be extremely helpful for us in having some sense of security. And if we end up not using it, then it can go in for our capital repairs that we know are coming, like the roof replacement, or ultimately the replacements we know that may have to occur for the field. So it's not money that's poorly set aside, but it truly gives us an insurance policy against something that we just have absolutely no idea what's coming forward. So Mr. Belfonte, I'm going to recommend that if nobody has any specific questions, we can have Terry stop sharing her screen and we can get back to our regular viewing model.
I do have one question.
Okay.
With regard to the PPE, I know that Terry said that really the amounts are unknown. So I'm curious about a couple of things. How did we come up with that number then, if the amounts are so unknown?
So we were approached by ACES to be part of a consortium for purchasing PPE, with the idea being, of course, if all the school districts in ACES are able to band together, we would be able to get better prices. And so that's really just an estimate. I think most of what we're looking at purchasing right now are masks. We did purchase some gloves, but it seems that the masks are going to be the bigger concern. And truly, we just kind of estimated. Somebody asked us, how, I think it was Dr. Turner asked at the finance, like how long does that get us? And again, we really don't know, because we don't know if the recommendation is going to be 1 mask a day or 3 masks a day, or just provide masks if people aren't able to bring their own.
Right.
But what we don't want to do, I guess, is because of the uncertainty over even whether high school and middle school students return or whether they continue distance learning, we're never going to not benefit by purchasing the teacher devices. We'll never not benefit even by those security cameras, because they are high resolution cameras, but it would be a shame to spend the money and have hundreds of boxes of PPE sitting around that we weren't able to use. So that's the one that we were the most conservative on, because we just have the least amount of knowledge on what they're going to require. And it's truly the one that is kind of the most COVID specific.
Right. I was kind of curious why the number wasn't higher, or why we weren't erring on the side of maybe purchasing more, just in case. But
yeah, I think it's really the unknown. And if we know by mid-July where we sit, then we'll have a much better sense of what we need to reopen schools.
So if the amount should be, God forbid, double that amount, the number came up closer to $30,000, the money would come out of that amount we're putting in the 1% and non-recurring account then?
Or just relooking at what we have for just within our 2021 budget.
Thank you.
I have a quick question about timing. With regard to a decision on putting 1% into capital non-recurring, is that a vote that's expected in August, or when are we going to actually weigh in on that?
That would be August or September. We have the auditors come and verify the balance, that it's available, before we ask to move it.
So we're likely to have a clearer picture of what these potential costs are. I'm hearing that there's a lot of potential large costs coming at us, but if we had more information closer to the date, it might help us understand what the options are for how to fund that.
I think we certainly would have a much clearer picture as to what the reopening schools looks like. But what some of the costs, particularly those related around, say, a second spike in COVID that could be anticipated for next year, or around something that may be related to additional education costs for some of our students that missed out this year. Those may take even, 6 months to 2 years for us to actually actualize. So this isn't yes, we'll have trust me, I hope by August we have a much better picture on what reopening schools looks like, but I still think we can anticipate some costs from this that will last for potentially several years.
I hate to ask again about the PPE, but I'd just like to understand this very higher end range estimate of $500,000. Is that just sort of throwing our hands up? It could be a disaster, or is that the price of 3 masks a day at gouging prices?
It's 3 masks a day if we had all of our students back 100% of the time, all the time in the building at a higher, not a higher price, but sort of at the going rate, I guess, right now.
And staff and teachers, if they
Yes.
had 1 mask per day.
Yikes. All right. Thank you.
The going rate on 3-ply masks today is higher than, in my opinion, what will be in July or even August. You're starting to see hospitals and or large practices, groups, doctors have their PPE. So in my opinion, the price has gone down, and I think the price will still go down. I would assume that you're looking at 3-ply masks and not N95s.
Yeah. I think the only people who require the N95
Yeah,
are the school nurses.
Correct. So the 3-ply mask, I think at one point we're at 60 to 70 cents. I think they're down to about 40 cents from if you're going to purchase them. So I think it's going to go down further. So I agree with wait and see what happens, but we'll see.
And I just have one other follow-up question with regard to the security cameras and the thermal imaging. You mentioned that it would kind of flag somebody who came without a mask, or flag somebody if they had temperature, and someone would pull them aside. So I'm assuming that would be nurses, whatever nurse is on duty that day, that would be the one in charge of that?
Well, so the way that the guidelines read, and again, we don't even really have those. It's the guidelines from summer school. So these could change for the opening of school. It doesn't have to be a nurse. It just has to be somebody trained to take the temperatures. Now, it would be our intention to have our school nurses be available to do that. But if you think of having 700 kids come in all at one time, we may need to have a couple people available to do those temperature reads. But we're sort of operating blindly here because we don't have guidelines to open school. What we have are the guidelines for summer school, and it required a nurse or a trained staff member.
Right. What I was asking was if we get the thermal cameras installed, I meant the person who'd be pulling aside anybody who set that device off in terms of having a temperature. That's
right.
What I mean. That
would be a nurse or a trained staff member if the summer school guidelines are the guidelines that extend into the regular school year.
But for now, we'd be doing actual temps because we don't have that device yet, correct?
That is correct, which is partially why we aren't running extended school year in the month of July, because we don't have the personnel who can manage.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions regarding this chart? Okay, well, a lot of those items were obviously taken care of before in previous meetings with actionable items, but some of them will be taken tonight, so we will see some of that later. Can we move on to item D, discussion and possible action on contracts over 35,000?
there.
Page 64.
The first contract is the last of a 5-year contract with Chartwells, who operates under Compass Group. This is a contract that is heavily regulated by the State Department of Ed. They have had to review it first. We will go out to bid next year. The original bid allowed for a maximum increase of the CPI, which was 3.2. We negotiated down to 2.5. That amounts to about a $2,500 increase over the life of the contract. Their employees, the cafeteria workers themselves, their contract is up. So they will be renegotiating the cafeteria worker contract under our agreement with them.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Brown.
this motion passed at the AFC, and I'm prepared to make the motion for the Board of Education.
Okay, please do.
All right, move to award a 1-year contract extension for food services operating in 2020, 2021 to Compass Group USA, Inc., Chartwells, per the proposed amendment, and the Director of Finance Administration is authorized to sign the amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Reed, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
thumbs up, thank you. Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo,
Yes.
great. Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Is she frozen?
She does look frozen, so we will say Dr. Turner did not vote in that motion.
Okay. Well, that motion still passes. Thank you. Just looking at the next items, during the AFC, did you guys take some of these as one or not?
We did, and also for a point of clarification, the next items are the ones that Ms. Perro sent sort of an addendum to you today. And it was really just to split out kind of the items that are pertaining to the 1920 fiscal year versus the ones pertaining to the 2021 fiscal year. So that's really the only major difference in those two forms. But if you wanted to know, it's the one that has the pink highlighting that we're actually referencing, although the contents are the same. And yes, the Finance Committee did take items 1, 2, and 3 together as one unit. And then
They took 4, 5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6 together as one unit.
We'll split them in half.
I'm going to say 1, 2, and 3 is kind of, redundant in that this is something we see every year. No surprises there, but then the others are certainly new for us. So would someone like to make a motion to take items 1, 2, and 3 together?
I'll make the motion.
Ms. Burke, thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Oh,
Who was that?
I'll second.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Ms. Eichler. Thank you. Okay.
A question on this?
Yeah, sure.
This motion to take them approves them all, or we're going to do a motion to take them and then a motion to approve them?
This is just a motion to take them all together, and then we'll make another motion to accept.
I think in finance, they were able to consolidate into one motion that approved them as well. Is that something we can do here, perhaps?
Well, they are a very efficient group, so we can try to emulate them and make the same if you guys are so willing.
I was watching on YouTube. It was good.
All right, let's do it. Do we need to amend the motion then?
So Pam, we're all set. We don't need to make an amendment to the motion. Okay. So this is a motion to take items 1, 2, and 3 together, not only to consider them together, but also to approve their passage together. Does that make sense for everybody?
yep.
Sure does.
Okay.
Thank you.
And it was a first by Mr. Brow and a second by Ms. Eichler.
Correct.
Okay.
Ms. Berg,
Now
I see
I
your
guess we
hand
can.
up.
I think it was the first by me, but it doesn't
Oh,
really
sorry.
matter. It doesn't really matter.
You're right. You're right. Okay, thank you. And does anyone have any discussion on these three items? Any questions, comments? Okay, if not, we can call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo.
Yes.
Excellent. Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes, and if the last vote didn't get through to you, that was a yes too.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Thank you. Okay, that passes. So then, would someone like to make a motion to take 4, 5, and 6 together and accept?
I'd like to make that motion, Mr. Chair.
All right, Ms. Cardozo, thank you. Do we have a
Second.
Mr. Brown, thank you. Okay. Do we want to discuss these items? You want to brief us first? Ms. Loomis or Dr. Byers or?
Sure. So we have the laptop devices, both for the students and the teachers. These were originally presented as part of the 2021 budget, leasing both 9th and 10th grade for students and the teacher devices. Given the way that we were thrown into a distance learning program so abruptly, and we anticipate that we could see something again in the next year, we want to be better prepared. And since there are funds available, we also know that teachers take very good care of their devices, and it would be better for us to purchase those because they would probably have a longer lifespan than the 3-year lease. So we're asking to purchase the teacher devices with the year-end funds of 2019-20, which would free up some money in the 21 budget to then extend out the lease for grade 11. And to better serve our students, we would have those 3 grades start their lease next year. The final one is the thermal camera that we talked about in the end of year purchase and a way of allowing our buildings to reopen. We have looked at 4. They're about $10,000 to purchase and install. And that would be out of the year-end funds.
Yeah.
The student devices are out of next year's budget.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second to take them together and to accept. And now we have an explanation, which I should have asked for first, but we have that now. Does anyone have any comments or questions regarding these?
I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, these 3 passed at the AFC as well. And the student laptops are a lease. The teacher, as Terry said, the teacher laptops are a purchase. And the cameras, albeit 40,000, would not just be add to security, but also could aid us in future flu seasons. So it doesn't have to be just a COVID thermo issue. It could be in the future as well.
Okay, so very functional. Okay.
Was there any consideration about getting devices for the seniors as well? I guess I'm just having, my thought process is we're getting for everybody except for them. So I'm just not sure how that.
So, I mean, if you look at best practice for implementing one-to-one programs, the older the student gets, the less successful you tend to be because they're not accustomed to it. And so we had never really had some consideration to purchase them for seniors at any point. We just always looked at an opportunity where they would roll up with the students. And originally our best recommendation was to get the 10th graders devices for next year and then roll it up. The second side to this, though, is that if we are able to purchase devices for grades 9, 10, and 11 and kind of add to what we already have, we have enough devices in our district through Chromebooks and other laptops that we've distributed that if there was anybody who was in need of a device, we could get them into the hands of our students easily. So the challenges that we would have faced this year would be mitigated by reusing and repurposing some of our less robust laptops for the seniors. And then certainly just in listening to the feedback from the survey, those couple of families where students had to share devices, if we're providing them for every grade but one, then there's that need to share is also lessened somewhat. So again, we think that this is probably overall big picture, absent of COVID, probably the best plan that we could put into place.
So is the intent, for example, of 10th grader getting a device for them to use it the 3 years, that same device, 10, 11, 12?
Yes, that would be the idea. So that with the 3-year leases, if you get one in 7th grade, you use it for grades 7, 8, and 9. And then you get a device beginning in 10th grade and use it in grades 10, 11, and 12.
So what will happen with the 11th graders who only use it for 2 years? Can we negotiate, was there any discussion about just doing the 11th grade ones for a 2-year lease, or what will happen with those?
So those will get repurposed back to one of the grade levels, which was again sort of always the intent that we were going to have. And then the other thing too is that over time, you know, we can use them to supplement the fleet as devices get broken or you know, we have to fix and repair things.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're prepared for the roll to be called.
All right, Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo, thumbs up, thank you. Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes, amazing. I got back in time.
Okay, great. That motion passes. Moving on to item E, the Director of Finance Administration approved transfers under 3,000 on page 69. Nothing to vote on here, just informational only. I see there's quite a few for May.
Yes, as they try to, you know, anticipate what they would need for the end of the year, or we consolidate for some of the smaller purchases, their transfers, many transfers.
The photographer needed, is that for graduation?
At all 3 schools, the stepping ups and the graduations.
Okay.
And the picnic tables, because that's something I question, was that's to make more space to spread students out and they can eat in the courtyard in good weather. They're metal tables that will last longer. They can bring them in and maybe put them in the gym. So different ways to be creative in spacing students out.
Okay.
Wow, that's smart.
And they're not going to be made out of concrete like the one that Ernie was talking about. Well, I never heard of a concrete.
Not this time.
Good. Okay, any other comments on that? Okay, moving on to F, that would be the discussion and possible action on budget transfers of $3,000 or more on page 72.
So these transfers are to support the request that we've talked about. So the thermal cameras, the PPE, the cafeteria fund, where I had been requesting, estimating 125, it's now down to 100 based on those things I mentioned in the PowerPoint. The software for bridging Munis and Frontline, the laptops that we are looking to purchase for teachers.
Okay. Over at the AFC, did you guys take these all as one?
We did, and I made that motion. I'd like to make that motion again, which is to take all these items between the thermal cameras, the cafeteria funds, all these fund movements of items we've already discussed and approved, to move those transfers 1 through 5 and approve those for those five transfers as one.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do we have a second?
And I would second that.
Thank you, Ms. Cardozo. Okay. Any questions regarding that or comments looking at it? Okay. All right, seeing none, we can call the roll. Dr. Byers, please.
Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo, we'll get back to Mr. DeMayo. He looks to be a little frozen. Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Yes.
there's Mr. DeMayo. I'm guessing that's a yes. Excellent. Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed. Thumbs up. Thank you very much, Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Great.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes. Then we're moving on to item G, discussion and possible action on medical insurance reserve on page 76.
So this is a motion to increase the reserve. A transfer is not needed. It's the line that we house all the medical in, and it is under budget, so we wouldn't need a transfer into that account. We'd be moving it into the self-insurance as part of normal procedures. But the request is to raise the reserve from 25% to 30%. For the reasons stated earlier that, there could be a second spike in COVID, which would increase claims. We know that routine procedures were not allowed in hospitals and doctors' offices. We know people may have had their own fears to avoid going to doctors, but that at some point in next year, we could see a return to those visits, an increase in services, another spike in COVID that would raise our claims. And if we dip below our 25% reserve when we build our 21-22 budget, we would have to have a larger increase on that line to get back to a 25% reserve. If we have the 30% and we use it, then, our funding request would be, pretty much on par what we expect for insurance year over year. If we don't use it, we can lower our request and help the 21-22 budget request by going back down to a 25% reserve. So it's a temporary measure just to offset another unknown area that for next year.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
The Amity Finance Committee did take issue with this particular item, considering the town's positions with taxes and concern over collecting those taxes, as well as possibly rising unemployment rates. This motion did not pass in the AFC. There were only two votes in favor.
Okay. Well, before we discuss, why don't we make some motions to get it on the table for discussion? Would someone like to make a motion? Someone wants to make a motion on it?
I'll make a motion to discuss.
I'm sorry, who was that?
I think Sheila and I spoke at the same time. Go ahead, Sheila.
I was going to make a motion to table until our next meeting.
Okay, or Ms. Cardozo, are you okay with that? I know you kind of spoke at the same time.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I always feel like it's better to discuss rather than table. So I would prefer we actually discussed it this evening. However, it is the will of the board.
I do believe there may be an issue in tabling it because our next meeting is in August, at which point it will be too late to actually have that discussion. So if that is the will of the board, I just want to make sure you're doing that, knowing that tabling it means we really won't get a chance to discuss.
Okay, well, since you guys both spoke at the same time, I'd like to accept Ms. Cardozo's motion so that we can discuss based upon what we just heard. Would someone like to second that motion?
I will second it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Turner. Okay, so what was the vote again on the AFC, Ms. Cardozo, as far as the numbers?
I don't know what the numbers are, but the motion did not pass, and there were two that voted in favor.
Yeah, 4-2 against. 4-2 against.
Okay.
You and Jenny in favor.
Okay. So just that's why we have it here, is we want to talk about it. So if anyone has any questions or comments about it, it is certainly an item I know in the past has been worthy of a lot of discussion, and what that number is. Obviously this year we have quite quite a lot against us here with the future and not knowing what we're going to see. And as you saw from the chart, I noticed we definitely had less claims in February before things hit, but certainly March, April, and May as well. What do you guys think?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Brown.
So I was one of the voices against it at the AFC. I did hear from the towns. I heard that they were concerned about the revenues coming in, the amounts that they were going to be able to collect from taxes this year, the amounts of unemployment that are hitting the county and the towns at this point. And I felt that, this is one of those historical numbers that we've talked about for many years. I know we've had guidance from other groups that have said 16% is the appropriate amount to have in reserve. We used to have a 20%. We did increase that to 25. And in order to increase it to from 25 to 30, I just don't know if it's really necessary at this time. So the $230,000 difference is either something that could be taken care of. Historically, since we raised our medical funds, we haven't hit that number. We've had a surplus each year. I don't think people that have missed a regularly scheduled visit to their doctor this quarter or this 6 months are going to go back and double up on that. They're just going to have another regular meeting, with their doctor going forward. So I'm not sure we're going to see that big spike. Again, that was sort of my feeling. And I thought this was an area that we had some flexibility on, and we do already have a 25% reserve. Even if we hit that and we took some of that for next year, we would make up that difference at the appropriate time when the economy is doing better.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. McCrevin.
I have a couple of questions with regard to timing, because I'm quite mindful that the Finance Committee, the AFC members who are the representatives from the 3 boards of finance were against us. So I want to be mindful of that. At the same time, I want to understand what time period of medical claims we're talking about, because we're obviously, I think everybody is concerned about what medical claims might do in the coming year. But I think we've got a small window between now and the time that we would be proposing our budget for the following year. And I think I understand that claims are paid out in the fiscal year they're incurred. So we've run, if we run from July 1 to December 1, and we have a certain experience, which will be lagging because people are going to just be getting back to doctors, et cetera. And then we have a big amount of medical costs that move forward. As Chris is pointing out, we've got the 25% reserve. We've also got the insurance on this, right? If we go past a certain number of claims or a certain dollar amount of a certain number of claims, right? We've got that backstop insurance.
Yeah.
And we've only got part of the year. We're not talking about putting away money for future years. We'll experience the impact of COVID and the reopening of, routine medical procedures. And I think I'm agreeing that we have this 25% cushion and we have those gap insurance policies. So considering what the finance committees are telling us, what the AFC vote was, I don't think I'm in favor of increasing our cushion. As long as I have the understanding of the timing, right? And that was my question. We pay out in the year we incur, right?
We pay out in the year that that Anthem charges us for the claims. So starting July 1, those services that people go for will start to hit the next budget year.
Right, but we're only looking, this vote would only be impacting money that we have to pay 1 year's worth of claims upcoming, right? It's not out into the future. So I feel like we have time to adjust if we need to, if our experience starts to get out of control. So that's my 2 cents on that.
My concern with leaving it to adjust later.
Can you hear me or no?
We could barely hear you, Steve. You're coming through a little garbled.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you clearly. May I suggest to Mr. DeMayo, if he has something to say and he's not able to communicate it.
Type it in.
Yeah, I was going to say he could use the chat feature and we could just read it out loud for the group, but we seem to have lost Mr. DeMayo altogether. So Dr. Turner then.
I've lost my train of thought. It had to do with concern over, it's if we leave adjusting how much reserve we have for the 2021 to 20 for the next year's budget, right? Then that is going to be landing in the year that we already know we've got something like a 5 or 6% increase needed, right? I would rather take it now when it is a smaller amount that we're asking for than have a disaster come and blow up our budget for that year even more and cause us to have cuts that, hey, Rosie, I'm sorry. I'm in the middle of talking to the school board, okay? It causes us to have, to cause us to have to make cuts to student services in that year, given that if we don't need the money, we just give it back and charge and do less in that budget line, right? Am I not understanding that correctly?
So I'm wondering how much, we have this backstop insurance. I wonder how much exposure we really have. Like how quickly could we run through 25% before the backstop hits?
Well, I mean,
it just depends on the claims. And that's what we just don't know.
Right, because the backstop insurance is about catastrophic claims, right? So individual claims that go over a certain amount.
So I think you're referring to the stopgap, right? Stopgap insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it 150, Terry?
150 per individual.
Yeah.
And 120% of over aggregate claims.
So I just wonder if 25% is going to be enough cushion, not only this year, but also the following year. And in which case that answers Jenny's question about if we're structurally changing the budget or not. I don't know.
It's something we don't have a specific answer to. That's just, we have not been through a pandemic before. We don't know what claims we'll research to afterwards. So it's just a recommendation made out of abundance of caution for, you know, what challenges we're facing in the future, and knowing that we have the funds on that line currently. It was the best recommendation we felt for the district.
Do you have the slightest idea how much an average COVID hospitalization would be?
Do not.
Okay.
It probably depends on the hospital, the age of the patient. There's probably a whole lot of factors that go into that. So,
gotcha.
Let me ask, the 1%, which if that were to pass by, that's a district vote, I believe, in August, September?
We have a special district meeting, yes.
Okay. And you were mentioning earlier, if, you know, we could use it for all the unforeseens. Would this be one of the unforeseens that we can use it for if things came out that in the fall it was a bad year claims wise for health?
Typically that money goes towards capital claims, and we could designate it for something unique like special education, which is what some school districts do. But other than that, no, it wouldn't be something. Now, could we relook at the budget and look at other ways to achieve capital improvements and then free up that money and put it into the healthcare? Yes, we could. But I'm concerned that the 1% isn't going to be enough for what we don't know is coming, because there is so much that we don't know is coming right now. So yes, it could be an option for us, but it may not be the best one, or it may not be the only one we have available. And again, I think the abundance of caution comes from two areas. The first is that we are self-insured, and so we're fully responsible for making sure that our insurance is covered for our employees. And the second, again, is we have no source of reserve if things really go haywire. And we heard the towns talking about kind of their concern and stress over things kind of going crazy, and we feel the same type of stress that they do.
Can you stay on that again, Dr. Byers? So for example, what would happen if we exhausted all of our stopgap coverage and we didn't have money, we would simply not pay the medical bills?
No, we would either have to like within our budget, put freezes on and figure out other ways to find money to pay for that, or we would have to go back to the towns and ask for additional allocations. And that would be through referendum.
And we've done that in the past.
But never for this reason.
No.
No, for
We've never had a
probably
pandemic.
not as good a reason.
And it remains true that we could be given guidance that says that we have to use that entire 1% on masks.
We could. We're going to hope that there's somebody more reasonable out there giving that guidance. But yes, we just don't know what the reopen schools plan looks like, and we're really not anticipating hearing anything about that until at best, probably more July.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I'd like to point out that in all the years that we've been self-assured, we've only hit our number once where we've come close to it, where we've just touched it. In all the other years, we've been under that number. Again, in all those years, we've had a reserve, and that reserve has done nothing but increase from where it was below 20% to 20% to 25%. And what we're talking about here is adding $230,000, which would be 1/6 of our reserve at that point, whereas we have 5 times that amount already in reserve and many years to deal with that. Also, I would like to point out, in the year that we've had the most significant pandemic that we've ever seen, our reservoir right now of claims is down favorable, and we have 3 times that amount in surplus right now from our reserves. So I know people weren't going in, but we were in a major pandemic in a very hot spot in the country, and we didn't touch our normal amount at that time. And we, like I said, we have 3 times that amount in surplus right now for this year. So I just don't know how much more. I mean, this is like getting rent ready for the next year, and we've got 1/3 of the rent ready versus 1/4 of the rent ready. Do we need 1/3 or do we need 1/4? And in addition to the normal rent, we've already booked the rent. So I'm not sure how much extra we need to have on hand.
Do any other members have anything additional to add, or a position that you would like to share with us and your thoughts?
I guess I would just like to say that can you guys hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, you can.
I'm completely in favor of adding the money to the cushion. I think that, as Chris said, this is a year unlike any other, but I think it's the exact opposite. I think that we have an obligation and a duty to our employees to make sure that we can pay these claims. I don't think that this is an extravagant amount of money that they're asking for at all to increase. And I think it would really be foolish of us not to do this. We have no idea what's coming. When we had this discussion at first, we never in a million years thought that there would be this many deaths in our country, this many deaths in our state. And I think that we need to have, what Dr. Beyer said, an abundance of caution here. You know that I'm always the first one to put the brakes on the spending, but in this case, when it comes to this type of thing, we are self-insured. I've been on this board for 4 years, and I'm sorry, almost 5. And we've always, like Chris said, come in under. We've always had a reserve, and we've never had to worry. If any time there is for us to worry, it is now. And I think that we need to be extremely cautious. We have no idea what this winter is going to bring. We've already been forewarned that things may become very explosive. I hope that doesn't happen, but none of us know. We don't have a crystal ball, and I'm completely in favor of increasing this cushion to 30%.
Thank you, Mrs. Burke. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, do we have to go up the full 5% and change that full 5%, or can we find, would some of the members maybe be content with a more middle ground on that?
It's a good question. I don't see any reason why we couldn't.
You can choose the level at which you want the reserve to be.
I guess the members that have been outspoken or maybe haven't spoken yet but feel that way, does that seem like something to be a good compromise for what we're talking about, or does it really not matter to you because you're happy with the 25, I guess is the question.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I agree. It's what Ms. McCrevin said before about trying to respect what the towns were saying in the finance committee. But I also agree, like Ms. Burke, that it would be helpful to increase, so perhaps to an intermediate amount.
Can I ask Terry what the number would be? I'm sorry.
It could be anywhere above 25%. So you could take a third of it, a half of it, whatever.
I think it would probably be easiest just to, because we could probably do the math, but I want to make sure for accuracy, if the board were to select a percentage, then we could back into the actual dollar amount to represent the percentage that the board felt was appropriate to compromise at.
So at this point, we have a motion on the table to accept at 30%. Do we want to close that out with a vote and then someone make a new motion at a new number? Or do we want the first person that made the motion to amend?
I would be happy to amend the motion to 27%. And that's exactly where I was going, Dr. Byers, as I was actually looking for a number and trying to buy some time so someone could figure that out. 27%. It's not quite half. I don't know that we would need to do 27.5%, but 27% as a gesture of goodwill.
I would second that friendly amendment to the original. Did you make the original motion?
Yes, she did.
Yeah. So I would second that. I think that's, if people are really concerned about this, I don't think it's necessary. And I can, in a year and a half from now, we can all do a told you so, but we'll forget about it. So it doesn't matter. That would be fine. 27% seems reasonable.
All right. So we have a motion and we have a second at 27%. Is there any further discussion on that?
I would have preferred to follow the guidance on the assumption that they know more about health industry projections than I do. But if the motion would fail, I'd sure rather have 27% than 25.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Turner. Okay. Can we call a vote then, Dr. Byers, please?
I apologize. Is this just the motion to amend it to 27, or this is to actually vote on the 27?
To actually vote on the 27.
Yeah.
That's a dollar figure, about $91,724.
So if we were to vote nay or negative on this, there's not a new motion to vote at the higher or lower amount. We're only taking this one number. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Would you like to vote on the change from 30 to 27 first, and then vote on if that doesn't pass?
We could, if we did that, if I'm understanding what Ms. Burke is asking, that would certainly open up the opportunity for a different motion if the board so chose.
Okay. So the motion on the table.
I prefer to start at the higher end and then vote down until people are comfortable as a better consensus building mechanism.
I agree.
Then you have to defeat this friendly amendment to 27.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Ms. Curtis, you were the one that made the original motion and the amended motion, correct?
Correct.
Would you want to do it a third time for us?
I think Ms. McCrevin is right. I don't think you can unamend it for a third time.
Ah, okay.
So she implied that if there was a desire to have a different motion on the table, that we would need to defeat this 27% one first and then put a different motion onto the table. Is everybody following me?
I think that's pretty confusing. So I'm going to suggest that you repeat that because this is where things can get lost. Pretty important.
So once you have a motion, we can make one friendly amendment to it, which we did. We took the 30% and brought it down to 27, and that's what's currently on the table. I don't believe that we can have another friendly amendment to that motion. So if the board would like to have a consideration for something other than the 27%, then this motion would need to not pass. And then there could be further discussion.
Or can the friendly amendment be withdrawn? Is that an easier way to do it? Or that's not possible?
Ms. Parrow?
Yes. Yes, you can withdraw a motion.
Okay, so
You
Ms.
can-
Cardozo, if you would like, you could withdraw the motion and then someone else can make a motion for the 30 and we could go down from there if that's the pleasure of the board.
I formally withdraw the motion,
The amendment.
the amended motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we don't need a second for that, correct?
No,
Okay.
Okay.
because she was the one who made the motion.
Okay, so would someone like to make a motion to accept this at 30%?
Well, I think that motion still sits with Ms. Cardosa,
Yes, it does.
right?
So you just need to vote now.
Did we have a second on
Yes,
the motion?
Jenny Turner. Dr.
Yes,
Turner.
Jenny Turner
Jenny.
seconded it.
Okay, so we're voting on the 30% now with the roll call.
All right, is everybody good? 30%. All right. Mr. Belfonte,
No.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
No.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo. Oh, sorry. Just going down my list. Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
No.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Okay, I believe that motion passes, correct?
Yeah, 8 yeses.
Thank you, Ms. Farrow.
Welcome.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, everyone. Moving on, we are going on to item H, the discussion and possible action on standard year-end transfers on page 78.
I bring forward this memo every year asking for permission. We have to make sure every line item is not over budget before we close the books. So we shore up all the salary accounts and everything, and anything, utilities, any of the regular accounts that may go over budget. And then we bring those to you in August to approve. This is approval to make those entries now.
Okay, thank you. Would someone like to make a motion to accept that?
I'll make the motion to accept that.
Okay, that was Ms. Turner or Ms.
Ms. Eichler.
Ms. Eichler, thank you. Would someone like to second that?
I'll second that.
Mr. Reed, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing. and
Mr.
hearing
Chairman,
none. Oh,
just
yeah.
what did the AFC say about it, the Finance Committee?
This was approved in finance.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Okay. Can we call the roll, Dr. Byers?
Yes, we can. Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Great. That passes. Thank you. Moving on to item I, other update on infrastructure project on page 79.
So this is just an informational memo. When the board approved the project back in April, they were wondering if we could bring down the cost of 1.4 million to redo the infrastructure. So we have put a lot of things in place. You allowed 300,000 to be transferred earlier that in April, I believe, as well. We had identified that we would be using some grant funds. The last piece is we are working on our final steps of our E-rate application and awaiting determination on what the final amount will be. We are in the last year of a five-year block of E-rate funds, and we are trying to capture every penny of that because they will expire. And if all that is captured, we would be left with $400,000 to finance, which would come in under next year's budget. If the E-rate funds go down, our finance number will go up. But overall, we will be significantly less than the $1.4 million of financing. So we're in good shape for that project.
That's some good news. Okay. Does anyone have any questions on the update? Okay. Great, thank you. And then we're moving on to item 4, personnel. We have contracts and salary increases for unaffiliated employees for the 2020-2021 school year, which is going to be an executive session. Can someone please explain how executive session will work for us?
So yes, so executive session, once we have a motion and an approval to go into executive session, in which I'm hoping you invite both myself and Ms. Loomis, we will go into a breakout room. And when we are in the breakout room, that part of the meeting will not be broadcast live. And so we will be able to have what is hopefully a brief discussion, keeping in mind that that could potentially fail. So again, sort of treat it as if we are live, just in case. Mr. DeRosa will be watching on his end to make sure that nothing goes wrong with that. And then once we have the discussion, you're going to have an option at the end to leave the breakout room. And so I would ask that everybody leave the breakout room, but not leave the meeting, so that we can come back and take the vote on the proposed increases in our public session.
So, quick update for the record, the Personnel Committee met on May 7th, and we moved forward a recommendation to the board to entertain this information. So I'll make a motion to go into executive session and invite Dr. Byers and Ms. Loomis to join us.
Thank you. Do we need a second, Dr. Byers, on that?
Yep, we do need a second for that. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Ms. Cardozo, I see, is raising her hand. Thank you.
Okay, so if everybody's patient, Mr. DeRosa will put us into our breakout room, and you should get a little box that says that you can join.
I think we need a vote quickly.
Oh,
maybe
sorry.
all those in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Before we leave, we're gone.
I think we got it.
Good job.
we're back. We all silently land in the room.
So I think Ms. Pero can note the time that we have exited from executive session. And so now you are back in public session.
Great.
There he is.
Are we voting on this?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendation from the administration as proposed for these obligations.
Thank you, Ms. McCrevin. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Sorry, Patrick. Patrick's got it.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Okay, Mr. Reed, thank you. Okay, all those in favor, we will go through the roll call.
You got it. Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Ms. Burke. Oh, did we lose Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Oh, no, there she is. Okay.
Sorry.
Everybody changed on my screen. Mr. Brow.
Yes.
Excellent. Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Mr. Howard. Thumbs up. Thank you. Ms. Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Dr. Turner.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, moving on to item 9, new business. Does anyone have any new business to discuss or bring up?
The only thing I would just ask the board is I sent you an invitation if you would like to attend graduation. And if you haven't, please remember to RSVP by noon tomorrow. So that way we can make sure you can get on campus.
Can you explain that again?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
What that would
Leopard-
attend? Yep.
So what's going to happen is we are going to be permitted to have cars up sort of picture around the tennis courts in the stadium area. And people will be able to park in sort of every other space. That will be faculty, board members, and I invited our first selectman as well. And during the wave of graduation, the students are going to enter through the North Peas exit or entrance and drive down the parking lot and receive their diplomas in front of the school. So we are looking for faculty and board members and selectmen to kind of line the driveway so that you can honk horns, cheer. You're allowed to get out of the car. If you're 6 feet away from everybody, you can wear a mask if you want. You don't have to because you're far enough away, but it's really an opportunity to give our students a processional of sorts as they parade down the driveway in their 2 vehicles.
And what time would that be for?
So there's 4 different waves, and you can sign up for 1 wave, you can sign up for 2 waves, but the first wave begins at 8:30 in the morning. We would ask that you're there a half hour before, and the last wave begins at 4 o'clock in the evening.
So you can choose
Can
whatever
I ask-
you like or all of them.
Exactly.
It's a long day.
May I ask, Dr. Byers, are you more concerned about not having space to line people on the driveway or not having people there to be festive? I could go either way for you.
We have plenty of room on the driveway, so we're hoping to have as many people as we possibly have interested.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. All right, well, thanks for that update. Any other new business items? None? Okay. Well, items for the next agenda will be due by July 31st, as we do not have a July meeting. That will be for the August meeting. So if we are all set, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Brown, do we have a second? What was that? Ms. Burke, thank you.
Let's make sure we vote this time before we leave.
Absolutely. Can we do it all with a thumbs up?
Yes, you can.
All those in favor?